Welcome to Functional Philosophy, the show in which I, Charles II, explain and apply Ayn Rand's philosophy, objectivism. If you'd like to ask me a question on objectivism or its application, just go to charles2.com/contact. And my last name is spelled T as in tango, E as in echo, and W as in whiskey. Hello everyone. Before I get started today, I just want to notify you that my power supply unit on my PC is failing and I am getting it replaced. In the interim, I will not have access to a computer, only my phone. I'm recording a few episodes in advance and I plan to upload them to YouTube from my phone, which I usually don't do and haven't done before. So this is just an FYI in case anything strange happens. I still expect to be able to put up an episode next Monday and the Monday after that and so forth, as usual. But if I don't, then you know the probable reason. Something has gone wrong with my plan to upload from my phone. Or I didn't record enough episodes for how long it took to get a replacement, or something like that. So let's get into the questions for today. Alright, first question is, I believe, what is the difference between Canada and America, and why are so many objectivists Canadians? I think that's the question. It was impossible to decipher. Going forward, I am not going to answer questions, from patrons or otherwise, if they are not written in a way that makes sense, if they are not basically coherent, intelligible, grammatical. Now, I'm not saying it has to sound eloquent. I'm not saying you can't have a typo here or there. I'm quite reasonable about this. I don't freak out at small things. But if you write me something I literally can't understand, you are not giving me the respect you owe me as someone to whom you're presumably asking questions because you want my insight. Why are you even sending me a question if you don't care to take the time to make it intelligible? Well, you know why. There are two reasons for this, and neither of them are legitimate. One is that you don't really care what I have to say. You just want me to say something you can take as dogma. The other is that you want me to figure out what you meant. You want me to intuit it through a mystical process. That's the burden you're putting on me. That's the service you're getting from me. No, that is not a rational trade. That is not the trade I am engaged in here. A prerequisite for having me respond to your comments or questions is that it be basically coherent. Aside from questions I get that are just totally unintelligible, I get things that are just grossly misspelled and run-on sentences, and like I said, a typo or mistake here or there is not a big deal. But if you can't even take the time to say, oh, there's a red squiggly line under this word, then what are you doing? You don't even have to reread it. Just look for the red squiggly line. You can't even do that. You just slop it out and then send it without any care for whether what you said makes sense to another human being. That is total subjectivism. That's just, well, whatever's in my mind, whatever my subconscious produces must make sense. Send. No, that is not how this works. Anyway, so I will strain to be just and answer the questions I've gotten so far, even if they are not clear, but I am changing that policy for your future reference. Okay, so what is the difference between Canada and America? Well, Canada lacks the spirit of '76. They did not fight a revolution over their freedom. They are essentially European, which means better than the rest of the world, but still primitive by comparison to America. You can see that in what is a truism about Canadian culture today. You know, everybody says Canadians are polite, but Canadians all say Canadians are just more passive-aggressive, and that is totally true. I have visited Canada. My ex-girlfriend is Canadian, and she always said you could tell a big difference between Canadians and Americans. You know how pessimistic I am and how down I am on Americans. She would always say, as bad as they still have a basic attitude of independence. you're still talking to a real independent mind when you talk to most Americans, whereas Canadians are utter followers. They're just dead behind the eyes. They don't think for themselves. I don't have enough experience with Canada to validate that evaluation, but it seems plausible. I didn't notice that much of a difference when I was there. It's not like the people there were great, but they didn't stick out to me as much worse than the people here. But that was her evaluation for what it's worth, and I would put it over mine in this case, because she has more experience with both sides. She analogized Canada to Lillian Riordan, Hank's wife in Atlas Shrugged. She depends on Hank, but resents him, hates him, and tries to punish him because she relies on him. Her view is that Canada sees America that way. Canada depends on America for everything, security, economic production, moral leadership, but is envious of America and hates it and denigrates it at every chance it gets. So that was her view. Canada as the envious, inferior sibling or or wife, which doesn't really make sense as an analogy, the wife part, but you get what I'm saying. And why are there so many objectivist Canadians, or why do they appreciate America more? Well, for the same reason foreigners appreciate America the most in general. For the same reason anyone who doesn't have something, who isn't gifted with something, granted with something, appreciates it. You know, there's a tendency for, even among people who care about class, women who are born into a higher class don't insist on their titles as much. But women who came up from a lower class insist on being called whatever the class honorific is. I mean, this isn't hard to understand. People who come from places that don't have the freedom America has appreciate the freedom more because they have something to contrast it with. That doesn't mean Americans are incapable of appreciating it, but it is more obvious for foreigners. This is why so many people associated with objectivism are foreigners. Ayn Rand is from Russia. Leonard Peikoff is from Canada. Onkar Ghate is from Canada. Yaron is from Israel. What is this? Is this just foreigner worship, as the idiotic alt-right and these scum would have it? No, there's nothing. It's not that objectivists worship foreigners or care about that per se. It's that people who aren't born here appreciate it more because they have something to contrast it with. You know, I'm not a fan of ARI, but their new president, CEO, whatever the title is Israeli, and I saw some people commenting on this on ARI's Facebook post, asking, aren't there any Americans who want the job, and suggesting that this is just ARI being, I don't know, secret Zionists or something. I mean, that is total nonsense. If I had to pick sight unseen whether someone was pro-American, all things being equal, I would choose the immigrant. Now, that's becoming less true as immigrants are indoctrinated with multiculturalism, but as I've said before, that is just a meta form of assimilation. They are assimilating into our doctrine of anti-assimilation. They wouldn't be so hostile to America if we didn't tell them to be. Anyway, so why Canadians in particular? I don't know that there are that many more of them, but in general, you find more pro-American people from places that are not America, but that are close enough that it's feasible to come to America. So basically, non-American Western countries, because that's where most immigrants come from, and immigrants tend to appreciate the country the most. All right, next, where along the hierarchy of ideas in objectivism does egoism fall? I have been chewing this idea and think it comes after the fact that life is the standard of value and alongside the point that man must live by principles. While I do answer these off the cuff, hierarchy is a technical, difficult thing. I mean, you can say in broad terms, oh, this must be before that, but sometimes, I mean, it can be hard to pinpoint just off the cuff. What comes immediately before this and after this, and or is on the same level as this? So I will just say that what you said seems plausible to me off the cuff. Definitely after life as the standard of value, as you said. Alright, next. Why is there a mental action on your part that corresponds to each virtue of objectivism? What is an example of this? My example, the mental action needed for integrity is recognizing what choice you made in terms of what you value so that you may then practice it. Well, if you're asking why does each virtue have a mental component to it, I think that's what you're asking. Well, the reason for that is simple. It's because virtue is a product of rationality. Morality only comes into the picture when rationality is possible. What is the prime virtue? Rationality. Reason and morality are the same thing. And what is unique about reason? Why do we have it and animals don't? We have free will that is bound up in rationality. So obviously, every virtue has a mental component because virtue means choosing between alternatives. That's a mental act. So this isn't really hard. All virtues have mental components because virtue means making the right choices. What is making the right choices other than a mental action? I mean, this is just, it's as simple as that. All right. Next, I heard you talk to Rucka about automating certain tasks that you know are consistent and work, such as when you play driving games. You are much better when you talk to others. You focus on certain tasks which are necessary for you to grow in while allowing yourself to not focus on other areas. I have no idea what that question means. Yes, I did give the example of being better at driving games when I'm talking to somebody rather than paying attention to the game, because it's like anything else, typing, playing piano, whatever. Anything that you've automatized, you have to then just let go. If you focus on it while you try to do it, all you can do is interrupt it. So it's best to just get your mind distracted with something else, your conscious mind distracted with something else, so that your subconscious can just follow the broad orders you've given it. It's like editing when you write. That's very bad. That's getting your conscious mind involved in the subconscious flow. This is why Ayn Rand strongly advocates do not edit as you write. So I think your question is, do you focus on certain tasks which are necessary for you to grow in while allowing yourself to not focus on other areas? I don't know what that means, but if you're asking, can you act from the subconscious with everything immediately? Obviously not. You have to train yourself to do something before it becomes automatized. I mean, you can't just... You have to learn how to play piano before you can do it from the subconscious. But once you learn how, then focusing on it will only cause you to mess up. You know, when you're at home and you're doing it, you don't focus on it because it's not that big of a deal, but then you're doing it in front of a big crowd and the pressure's on, and so you think about it and you focus on it and you mess up. This is why people mess up when it's most important, because they focus on it. Whereas if you just did it like you did at home, when you're not really focused on it because there's nothing at stake, you'd do fine. So figure out ways not to focus on it as much, and then you won't mess up when it really counts. But yes, I think your question is, do you have to learn something before you can do it automatically? And the answer is yes, of course. If you'd like to keep up with everything I do, just go to charles2.com. If you'd like to enable me to do more, just go to patreon.com/charles2 and become a supporter. Thanks for listening.